Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel. As you can see, one more match here. I figured I just had enough time before I left, so I figured I'd play another round. These matches tend to be a bit shorter than I remember them being, just because I'm on low funds battles, I guess. So, I used to have games that lasted like half an hour or something like that, where both of us would be skirmishing around, both of us would be trying to get into a good position. Lately, that hasn't been happening. I think that might be because of the change they made to shrines. So, anyway, we're up against a 8-star general. He's a bowman, skilled leader, journeyman swordsman who prefers a balanced army. So he is a very well-rounded individual. We're on crossroads, and I need to upgrade to the larger army size. I did not remember what the breaking point for that was. So, good times. I think I'll use this round to show you some of the interesting DLC units here. So I've got Fire Cav. Let's use these Tetsubo Warrior Monk Heroes. And I'm just pulling this out of completely left field here. I'm going to get rid of these guys since they don't tend to contribute much. I'm going to use these Naginata Warrior Monk Cavalry instead. Just because that's sort of more efficient in these sort of matches. We'll use the long Yari Ashigaru to accompany my veteran Yari Ashigaru. Let's just pile in as many veterans as we can get here. Now, my opponent's going to have a much bigger advantage in this match than my opponents have been having in other matches, just because I don't really have the necessary veterans to compete against these sort of players. But, you know, it's one of those sort of situations that I think I can get through here if I play well. And, you know, it's always one of those situations where you should be playing well anyway. If you play well, you should win. If you don't, you shouldn't. So, I kind of think I want to also bring in these guys just to show what they're like. Okay, I need to do a little bit of a change here. So, let's get rid of them. Get back these two guys, and that leaves me 410 for something like these guys. Yeah, let's get these guys. Okay, so this army is completely cobbled together and random. Hopefully it'll be adequate. I don't really know. So, yeah, I had thought that I was still in the low funds army size at level 3, but I guess not. It must be the breaking point. So, in any event, I've got 4 Katana units and a hero unit that is kind of like a very small Katana unit. They're inexpensive because they come in a small unit size and they've got some drawbacks compared to other heroes. But I've got a little bit of shooting in the form of these heavy gunners. And I've got plenty of spears just in case my opponent's got heavy cavalry. The Fire Cav is basically a very upgraded Yari cavalry unit. They're already a very good unit, so this one is incredibly potent. What I'm hoping I'll have here is mobility, but my shooting is fairly weak. So, what I'm hoping my opponent doesn't have is a lot of gun cav, because I, again, didn't bring quite what I need to take that. If he took 2 units, I'll be in trouble. If he just took 1, I should be okay with the cavalry setup that I've brought. So, hopefully if he has brought any, he'll only have brought 1. But there are 2. One comes with handguns. They're fairly average. They're easy to counter. The other one are the shotgun ones, which if they get close, they do horrible things to you, but are a little bit more vulnerable in my opinion. I'm not sure if this is going to be enough swordsmanship to beat him in this particular type of matchup, just because that's the kind of swordsmanship I expect to see in the low funds battle. But I have got more spears, so I can try and spear wall him to try and grind down exhausted troops and then sweep around with my swords. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what he's taking. In any event, he's got the Untrained Fugocook, so I am glad that I don't have too many more swords, and he's got the Metsuke Inspector, which doesn't really do much. Mostly it's for the morale penalty in this case, but generally you take it if you want to deny your opponent the bonuses that you get from the Shinobi Informant, I think? I'm not really sure. I'm trying to remember who does that. I'm pretty sure it's the Shinobi Informer. Anyhow, get these guys all set up here. So I've got a lot of spears here, so I'm not too worried about cavalry getting around my back or anything like that. Gonna just set up like this. Pretty basic formation here. Pretty good all-around formation. Now, if my opponent did something very peculiar and went heavy bows, I might have to just rush in, but most people don't do that, especially not anymore. I have got a heavy, strong cavalry wing, though, and I'll have it hidden in here. And for now, let's just see how this goes. If I can sneak my cavalry around while I move towards the shrine here, my opponent's got at least... I'm glad I got all these spears here, since my opponent has got a very large amount of cavalry and he has got mounted gunners. So hopefully he doesn't have mounted gunners and the Donderbus cavalry, because I don't know if I have enough tools to deal with both at the same time. Now he's also got these bow warrior monks, so they're going to be able to completely outrange and destroy my guns. One of us has a complete lag problem here. But on the plus side, I'm pretty certain that this means my opponent doesn't have that much in the way of his own infantry. It doesn't look like he has. So what I'm going to try and do is probably going to get me killed, but I want to move my units around so that I can try and get shots off, but at the same time, let's get my bows over here. Now, since I've got such good cavalry hidden in the woods over here, my opponent isn't necessarily going to be in any sort of strong position against me. Mounted gunners, as you can see, I'm going to start picking away at them with my bows. What I'm hoping for is that he'll get disorganized here, and it looks like he's sort of mismanaged his units, or he's ignored the threat from my units. I got a volley off, but it did no damage. So I'm just going to try and skirmish away with my bows here. And yeah, I've made it into his units there. Let's see if I can... Nope. He has a ton of cav. So, here is a very, very dangerous situation. But I think I can pull through here. Let's just get my units around to where they need to be. If I can draw his units in too close here, I'll be able to countercharge with my cavalry here. And I think this is the very definition of too close. Hopefully my heavy gunners will get a volley off. My light cavalry looks like one of them got run off by his Yaris. That's fine. Things are getting completely hectic here. Yeah, focus up here, focus up. And this is going to be the end of my cavalry. But on the plus side, it looks like I'm getting through a lot of his units as well. His Nodachis have countercharged, which is fine. See if I can get that charge off here. Now, I've still got a couple sword units, so... His Yari cavalry over there is just about gone. And it looks like I've gotten rid of his gun cav, which are the ones that I really needed to get rid of. Let's get War Cry up. And that should kill him before he can get me with his yeah, I should be able to crack through before my general dies at the very least. After which I should be at a disadvantage, or at a good advantage here. Yeah, there goes my general, which is bad, but not unsalvageable. And since I've got this mobile skirmishy bow unit, I can actually deal some damage to him when he's trying these run-through attacks. So this isn't as bad as it looks. I'm in his general and his bows now, so his mobility is going to start meaning less and less. I do need to try and keep my bows alive. So, yeah, this was a very spammy army on my opponent's part. Kind of glad that I brought the spears that I did. His general's about to fall here. And that's going to start to chain rout his army. So, in this particular case, my opponent had a lot of mobility, but I had a lot of spears to counter that, and I was willing to engage him on multiple places. What I normally recommend under these circumstances is to not split your forces up into two groups, just when your opponent has that mobility advantage. But in this particular case, I found it was more appropriate to do so, just because each of his components were so far separated, and since each of his components was so directly counterable, I figured I could probably just charge in on one side while trying to keep him away and trying to grind him down with my cavalry. So that worked out well in my favor. There was a huge gap in space where he couldn't move because my gunners would have killed him, so that was also preventing him from linking his army back up to itself, and that gave me a lot of room to breathe, and he couldn't allow that, basically. So, good game to my opponent. Hopefully next time he'll... I don't really know what he could have done there. He had a fairly good handle on his cavalry and the way he was moving them, but it's not a safe or an effective strategy, in my opinion, to use that much cavalry. Especially against an opponent that knows sort of what they're doing and can manage their units relatively effectively. So, almost at the next rank. I've got one skill point, so that's all good. I've got a useless place that gives me absolutely nothing, but it gets me a little bit closer to my objective, so... yeah, the surgeon is completely useless. I wouldn't recommend ever taking it. The banana hat. I'm not gonna wear the banana hat. I got a new veteran slot, which is good. I'm starting to fill up my veteran slots pretty quickly nowadays. Clan influence, and let's, oh yeah, clan token. Let's see what veteran I unlocked. I might have gotten a new veteran. Another katana samurai. Those are really good. That guy has a really interesting looking mask, that guy front center. Wonder if you could somehow get an entire unit of guys with that. Anyway, let's just check our unit statistics. My avatar's bodyguard, he was doing pretty poorly because he got caught up in a few remnants of those Yaris, and those guys are just great counters to cavalry. My Tetsubo Warrior Monk Hero, an inexpensive unit that gives morale. They're one of the reasons my army didn't shatter after my general died. I've got my Lone Sword Ashigaru. They didn't do too well, but they did okay, and I think they did well enough considering I think they were fighting cavalry. My veteran katanas did a very good job chopping through there. My other two katana units did a lot of damage but died. My heavy gunners, as you can see, did pretty much diddly squat, and that's because my opponent was too afraid to get sort of near them. My long Yari Ashigaru, same sort of thing. And my other spear units, he didn't really want to go near either. My fire cav sort of broke even, and my Naginata warrior monk cav got swarmed over and died. It was sort of my bow cavalry that were doing the main thrust of the work there. These two light cav ganged up on a Yari cav. I was hoping that they'd win it, but they just barely didn't. They came close enough that I think that sort of justifies their cost, considering they're 100 cheaper. All in all, though, those are sort of how my units broke down. None of my units did really spectacularly in this one, in this particular case, and that's what you'll tend to see in these larger games, especially when your opponent's keeping away from sort of those star units that can get a lot of kills. His army, on the other hand, those bow warrior monks weren't properly protected or being microed adequately, since that's pretty much how it happens if you don't, if you're microing a lot of cavalry. I wouldn't take these guys at all if I were him. I would have replaced them with 2 or 3 matchlock units. Most of his Yari units did decently. One did very well, but another one did okay. This isn't really the numbers you need, though, against a heavy infantry army. Since I have got so much more infantry than him, he needed to kill things like 150 per unit or something like that. His Nodachi, they did okay. I wouldn't call that a great return on investment given the circumstance. His mounted gunners, I was hunting them down exclusively almost. They didn't do well at all. And his Naginata Samurai didn't do very well since they're fighting sword units. So that's sort of the breakdown of this battle. Hopefully, I don't really like it when my opponent takes just too much cavalry. It makes it a very sort of dull game, in my opinion, especially when he's sort of basing it around his ability to use those gun units. It's just not really an interesting thing, because it's mostly them running around in circles for no good reason. I don't really like that. I'm not a fan of that. But, you know, if they're going to kite, I'd prefer it if they did it at the start of the game during the sort of skirmish thing. But what they try and do is wipe out all of your cavalry and your bows so that you can't fight back against the guns. And then they just try and win it with that. So looking at this, as you can see, I've got an upgrade for my fire cavalry. Fire cavalry with 2 melee attack upgrades and 2 melee defense upgrades are very strong. Testable warrior monk heroes. These guys I'm never really too sure about, since I like the fact that they're so inexpensive. But on the other hand, a few upgrades are pretty useful for them. I start with melee defense on them just because their melee attack is already 30. They aren't going to need too much more of that, really. So getting that up to 10, they're now a very, very strong unit. Just in general, so they can get in there and they'll do a lot of damage before they go down. These guys didn't really do much, but they're still at full strength. These guys did a little bit, but let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of all the units that are sort of battered or which took some damage here. Okay, so now I need to start looking at medium funds armies. So let's set up a medium fund army. These guys also have a rank, so let's give them melee attack. So when you go into a medium funds battle, it's a little bit different than a standard one. You need to consider far more things. And what a lot of people do nowadays is take those mounted gunners. I don't like them personally. I think they have a lot of weaknesses. Sorry, I'll be right back. Hey everyone, I'm back. Now one of the biggest problems with the mounted gunners is that you need a large number of cavalry to defend them, or you need to take a lot of melee spears to try and defend them, but in which case you're keeping them in your main line, in which case they're acting exactly the same as foot gunners that can run away a little bit more easily. So the best way to get your use out of them is to have a lot of cavalry, which means that you're going to be deficient in infantry. And that's not necessarily a great thing. If your opponent can sort of square up against your large cavalry force, get those guns in position that they can counter fire at your cavalry, you're going to lose usually, just because they come in smaller units, and those horses make them larger, easier targets. So it's not really a strategy that I like, or one that I'm supportive of. So keep that in mind when you're taking them, is that they have got a weakness, and that's that, like, if you're not adequately protecting them, they'll just get run down. And my opponent had a ton of cavalry, and even then, he had way more invested in cavalry than I did, and I still ran his gunners down. So that should tell you exactly what you need to do to protect these guys. It's ridiculous. Positively ridiculous. But when you do use them correctly and you can pull them off, they're incredibly annoying to deal with. It's almost impossible to deal with them. So that's the advantage of using them. The disadvantage, of course, is that it dictates your entire army composition in certain respects. If I didn't have as much cavalry as I did, I probably would have been in trouble. But at the same time, I did take that much cavalry, and that's why he couldn't use them effectively. So we're just going to try and look at our army here, and you can see I've still only got like halfway to a full army. And that's the advantage of being in these medium funds battles, is you can have a much larger army, but of course your opponent can as well, so it's not all good, it's not all bad. I'm trying to remember which of these was a better unit all in all. I generally recall taking these Naginata Warrior Mount Cavalry just because of the cost disparity. They're cheaper by 50 compared to the Ari Cavalry, and they're a little bit more stable in combat just because they've got this ridiculously high morale. You've got high melee attack and defense, and they've got relatively decent bonus against cavalry. They're 8 short on that, but I'm not sure how that really plays into the mathematics. What I usually hear is that the Ari Cavalry will win if they get a good charge against the Naginata Warrior Mount Cavalry, or if they cycle charge. But the Naginata Warrior Mount Cavalry, obviously, if you keep them in melee in a sustained fight, do better. So it's a micro thing, and it's a question of how good you are at the micro. The other advantage, of course, for the Ari Cavalry is that they're faster, so they let you catch and run down certain units a lot better. I probably only need 1 bow cavalry, so I'm going to toggle that off. And what do I want for the rest of my army? I'm going to consider using nuns, and I might consider using bows, but at these sort of values, it's going to become less and less valuable for me to take bows, just because of the way they work. They are good at picking off a few members of a high-value unit or forcing your opponent forward, but when you get into the larger funds battles, your opponent has enough men and enough high-value men and armor that they can just sort of shrug off the shots completely. So I'm taking 3 of these units of Matchlock Ashigaru. They're an inexpensive unit, and they're a very good counter to a lot of different things, especially given what people seem to be doing lately, which is a lot of cavalry. I've got a good sword group, which is going to be the main front line here. I'm going to add 1 more to that. And I think since there have been so many cavalry sort of spam armies, or pseudo-spam armies, from what I've been hearing anyway, I'm going to load up a bit on spears. So I'll figure out what I want to do for that. But in the meantime, I hope you found this informative, and I hope to see you all next time.